I'm not proud of what I did with the valve. I'm not proud of how long it took me to admit why I did it, either. People say confess sins feel lighter, like you drop a stone out of your pocket. Whoever said that never opened the wrong gate underground and heard a town breathe in through concrete. The first time I went below the city was because of my uncle. Not the cool kind of uncle. The kind with a county job and a drawer full of pocket knives who chews wintergreen gum so steady you start to count the rhythm without meaning to. He was a night attendant at the North Siphon, which was a fancy way to say he babysat an old storm control complex built into the ribcage of the river. There's a spillway, a control room, and below that a belly of concrete tubes big enough to park a bus in. All of it smells like cold pennies, mildew, and the ghost of roadkill because runoff carries everything. Ants, oil rainbows, grass in clumps, once the nub of a deer hoof. If you've never breathed air that sticks to your teeth, you don't know that damn can feel like guilt. He took me because my grandmother couldn't watch me that week and my parents were splitting up, and he figured shift below ground would keep me out of trouble. I was 15. I wanted anything that sounded like a story. He gave me a high-vis vest that fit like a joke and a headlamp with a strap that caught my hair. And he told me there was only one part of the night that mattered. Procedure drop, he said, tapping a corkboard in the control room. The station lights hummed, a green glow spilling over old diagrams. The board had a laminated sheet with a zip tie through the corner. The yellow had browned around the thumbtack holes. Someone had scrawled a smiley face in marker on the top right, and then angrily exited out. Rule 1. Check the levels on the quarter hour. Don't chase an unlogged spike. Rule 2. If you hear 4 chimes in the big pipe, that's not us. Do not answer. Rule 3. Keep your left hand on the wall, your right on the rail. Whatever touches you first, you don't touch back. Rule 4. Peppermint if you panic. Sucking it helps your breathing. Don't spit it on the slab. Rule 5. If a voice knows your name and you didn't give it, kill your light and count to 30. Count slow. Count honest. I laughed. Peppermint makes your throat open, he said, tapping his own cheek with a knuckle. And it covers the rust stink. Nobody likes rust. Calm thing. The rest of it, don't laugh. The pipes carry more than rain. Like what? Rats. He looked at me the way someone looks at a stove, like it just clicked on by itself. Not spooked, just resigned. Whatever people wash off them. Better to keep your hands where we said. Better to not answer. Better to count honest. He folded a sticky note once, twice, and slid it into the binder onto the procedure sheet. The note had a streak of orange grease and a torn corner that looked like a tooth mark. On it, in a slanted all caps, he'd written, "Take it steady. Do not go down for a voice." It meant nothing to me then. It meant everything later. There's a metal staircase that drops into the main spillway. It's honest metal, every step rings. The air gets heavier with each landing like you're walking into someone's pocket. My boots squeaked. The river muttered through a grate. Sometimes a car rattled the grate above, and the sound came down like thunder trying to find its shoes. We walked the big pipe. It's not exactly a pipe, more like a concrete throat that narrows where the old engineers like the math better. The echo does strange things down there. Your own steps fold back to you from weird angles, so it feels like someone walks behind your heart. He made me walk with my left hand brushing the wall. The concrete was cool and had this chalky grit that clung to my fingertips. You could feel the seams where the molds kissed decades ago. A repeat texture like a bad dream you keep re-entering. Hand stays there, he said, tapping my wrist. You panic, you freeze, you'll still know where the wall is. And the rail always leads to a ladder or a valve house. If you let go of both, you can drift in here without a drop of water. How would I drift? He didn't answer. A quarter hour later, we were back topside with instant coffee that smelled like burned rope. He logged his levels. He chewed his gum. He played Keno on his phone and lost $1 he'd never had. It was a nothing job until it wasn't. He said floods weren't rain, they were timing. People think water falls from the sky, and that's that. But in this town, the river wore the city like a shirt. We jutted into it with a historic district and a row of restaurants one flood away from becoming an aquarium. He sent me down for the second check on my own. "Take the meter," he said. "Keep the rules in your head. And don't turn your light off unless you need to. This time you don't need to." "I thought it was always dark," I said. "Yeah," he said, looking at me, and I didn't understand the shape of that look until years later. But there are different kinds. I took the meter. Its plastic felt soft from 1,000 hands. The cord slapped my thigh. My headlamp made a coin of light in front of my steps and shivered across the bolted plates. I counted the stairs, not to be careful, just because numbers like the attention. 21 to the landing, 8 to the next. Who paints numbers under their breath? Boys with parents upstairs arguing in whispers that cut harder than yelling. Boys who will do anything to feel like they know the sequence of something. The big pipe moaned. Not loud, just that low organ note concrete gets when it's settling back into itself. I told myself the smell was mineral and not old water that forgot what sky is, because words change how your body receives things. And then I heard it. For chimes. Clear as a glass fork struck, just right, but not metal. Not a tone made by something built. More like the sound a throat makes when someone laughs inside their mouth and doesn't want you to hear it. 1, 2, 3, 4. I stopped. I couldn't help it. The instructions were in my head, but my body is a dog to a sound. I turned my head, as if the angle of bone would pick a direction out of the echo. "Uncle," I said, stupid, hopeful, 15. What you need to understand is I didn't answer. I didn't say anything back to the chimes. I didn't go toward them, but it doesn't matter. When an old place wants to talk, and you twitch at all, that's consent to the echo. The echo picks you up like a toy. The fourth chime wasn't there the second time. The second time was 3. The way you think someone knocked, but it turns out it's just a pipe giving up air. I breathed again. I took 2 more steps. Left hand paint brushed along the wall. The concrete's temperature made sense. The air felt less like a mouth. Then something touched my right wrist. It was nothing like a rat. People are always brave about rats. They shove them into stories as if whiskers make fear smaller. This wasn't fur or claw or even a bug leg. It was a hand. Not warm, not cold exactly, but the precise temperature of water you leave in a glass overnight, where the surface is smooth and the middle tastes like coins. The hand closed around my wrist like a damp bandage, like my veins were instructions it wanted to read. I didn't touch back. My right hand stayed on the rail like the rules said. My left stayed on the wall. A trembling that starts in the teeth is a stupid kind. It makes you think your skull is the coward. I craned the headlamp down. Light washed over concrete, and old gum stuck to the rail like a tiny fossil and a smear of something black that wasn't oil. For half a second my lamp caught the hand, pale as the inside of a peeled grape. Tiny, a child's. 3 fingers and the shadow of the rest. The way a long exposure holds a ghost. I yanked my arm back and the grip let go with the sensation of, this is gonna sound wrong, of hair sliding through your fingers underwater. That texture that isn't texture. A lack with direction. "Uncle," I said, not a brave sound. His name came out in a thread. "Don't answer," something said. Beside me. Not as if sound traveled. As if a mouth had opened under my left ear. A whisper, so close my eardrum flinched. A woman's voice. Dry as paper, but patient like a nurse who knows exactly how long a body can be held under and still be okay. I did what the rules said. I killed my light and counted to 30. I was 15. I'd never counted honest in my life, but right then I counted slow, true, with each number an anchor in the dark. By 8 my mouth filled with spit the way your body does when it's getting ready to be sick. By 14 my knees and my body stopped being friends. I kept my left hand on the wall, my right on the rail, nails pressing crescent moons into the meat of my palms, so I'd know they were still there. By 27 my whole head went cold, like the scalp gets when you cut your hair too short. At 30, I turned my lamp on and kept walking and didn't say a word to my uncle until we were upstairs with a coffee and I could pretend the burble under the slab was just old plumbing and not something that knew my wrist. He didn't ask what I'd seen. He asked if I'd taken the peppermint. I shook my head. He nodded once, like a judge accepting a plea. That rule, he said, the safe one. If you'd taken it, they would have tasted where your breath was coming from. They like sugar. He slid the bowl across the console and locked the jar of peppermints in a drawer. Most people think that rule's for nerves. It's not for you, kid. It's for them. Breath sweeter means bite closer. I don't. What the hell is down there? Run off, he said, eyes on the screen. Bits of everyone. I told myself he was keeping me calm with a joke. I made sense of it tidy. The way I made sense of other things that summer. The way you make sense of your father's apology by thinking it's aimed at you and not the bottle. You have to go to sleep. Later that night, visiting the men's room off the control floor, I found another plant. Another sticky note taped inside the stall door at my eye level, not the kind of manager puts up to tell you to wash your hands. Same handwriting as my uncle's. Same orange grease streak. If you hear her counting behind you, skip a number. Make her start over. I asked him. He said, old superstition, from the guys who ran the place in the 70s. Give you something to do besides cry. He smiled like it was a joke that still worked. His teeth were too flat for how little he smiled. We worked 3 nights in a row. It was summer and the heat was doing that thing where it sits on the city like a dun dog. Street trees were ashy, roofs softened. Strangers were louder to each other because heat thins patience. The river dropped to a slow chocolate ribbon that burped when it passed the old tannery pilings. We saw nothing. We heard a lot. Shifts go like that. The place learns your shape and decides whether to play. On the 4th night, the rain arrived the way a fight does, without respect for schedule. You think storms build like a moral. They don't. They punch your bowl of air and get over with. The rain wrung the sky into the siphon, and the siphon said thank you the only way it could, by bulging. We were 2 hours into the shift. My uncle chewed a stick of gum, so hard his jaw clicked. The level jumped once on his monitor and then flattened. Non-event, he said. Catch basin burp. He said it mostly to his own breath. I went down on the quarter hour with the meter. I kept my left hand scrubbing that wall. I kept my right on the rail. I counted real without thinking this time. The pipes made their organ noise. Water slithered and boomed in different compartments like drunk neighbors arguing through drywall. When the rain hits old cities, the water remembers 1,000 old routes. Your feet are just witnesses. The chimes came that hour. 1, 2, 3, 4. Then they came again. 1, 2, 3, 4. They're softer when they're closer. It's hard to explain. The only way I can is, a whisper on your neck feels closer than a shout across a room, even though less air moved. I did what the rule said. I didn't answer. I kept counting my steps. My tongue hurt from pressing against my teeth. My headlamp skated across something written on the concrete in chalk. It said, Sarah. Then below it, in a smaller hand, someone had written, 1981. Ask about the vines. Chalk doesn't last in that damp. This looked fresh. I crouched, my meter hanging off my wrist by its cord like a pet. There were vines in the trickle along the wall. Not the green kind. The kind that looked like hair clotted into weed, braided by time, and grit into something partly alive. They waved without current. They braided around my boot toe. They slid back when I moved like they knew the show was over for the moment. I put my hand out the way you might to a dog you don't want to spook. But my left hand slapped my wrist. My own hand. Rules are better if your body enforces them like a religion you forgot you joined. Back up top, I told my uncle about the name in the note. He ignored the board and yanked a drawer that stuck. Papers rasped. Photocopies slid across the console, the edges soft with handling. Missing kids from 79 through 83. Sarah with an H or without. Flyers where parents had used twice as many exclamation points as a sane sentence can hold. He stacked them like a deck and erased them from the table in one sweep, as if you can sweep 30 years off a slab. I don't want to. You want to keep this job? He wasn't joking. Nobody goes down for a voice. Nobody goes down for a name. People get bounced. Heaters slip. The river takes the insult personal. You go down for a reading, and you come back up. What's under there? He stared at the screen so long, I started to count the seconds in the buzz. Fence, he said. That's all that place is. A fence. Keeps the town from knocking on the river's door and the river from walking in with its boots on. Sometimes the fence catches things. What things? Things people wash off themselves because they don't like to hold that weight. Cities shed. The tunnels carry all the sheddings. If you want soft answers, go home. If you want to make the city not flood, sit there and shut up. I shut up. I held the meter. The gum smell had given up. His breath smelled like copper. I only saw years later that he was scared and calling it discipline, which men do, which I learned to do, which I'm trying to stop doing even as I say this. The rain tapered. Shift into nothing. We got breakfast, the kind that makes your heart negotiate with your colon. We didn't talk about the hand or the name or the way the vending machine sometimes gave you an extra bag of chips like the place wanted you to keep chewing so you didn't use your mouth for anything else. 2 years later, my uncle was dead. It was clean. His truck went where trucks go when a sleepy driver takes the curb by the silos at a speed his life can't survive. People said nice things at a service in a room that smelled like lilies pretending they weren't a funeral flower. On the bulletin board at the siphon station, the rules stayed. Someone had written over Rule 4 in red Sharpie. Seriously, do not spit them down there. Because peppermint wrappers had appeared in the runnel. Because the station inherited men who didn't read their own instructions, as if instruction were also something you could wash off. I took the night job after a string of worse ones. Men in my family take the night. It's how we avoid being awake when our choices visit. The city slid for me like a belt through loops. Rent got paid. My headlamp lived in the passenger seat like a sleeping infant in a too-cheap carrier. The first week back, I taped my uncle's sticky note under the laminated rules. Same grease streak, same tear, and a new thumbprint. Mine. Take it steady. Do not go down for a voice. I told myself I was honoring him. That's a nice story when what you mean is you're still afraid and you've grown the fear into a tradition. 2 months in, on a night so quiet the moths sounded like someone sanding, I found a new plant in a place no one goes unless they've forgotten they're a person. In the far valve chamber, behind the old chain hoist, someone had tucked a child's sock into the chain links. It was gray with grime, but the elastic was bright pink with tiny crowns. It had that tiny dent at the cuff where a safety pin had once held two together. You know the dent. If your mother did your laundry and kept pairs from divorcing by pin, you know that little scar on a sock rim. I didn't touch it. I stood there with my headlamp sweating onto my neck, and I didn't move. My brain did. It sprinted. In half a second, I lived 8 lives where I took the sock and turned it in and saved somebody and blamed myself for not doing it sooner and got famous and got fired and got haunted. In one of those lives, my mother was proud. In another, my father called. I left the sock where it was. You can judge me. Lines are easy to draw in clean air. 3 weeks later, the rain didn't arrive like a fight. It arrived like a hell breath. The barometer fell. You could feel it in your molars. People were at home dressing their windows in towels, like that ever fixed anything. Road crews dragged their barricades out to the corners where the floods rehearsed every year. I put on the radio in the station because the quiet was a shout. The voice said the name of our city in a way that made it sound like a problem you could finish if you had one more hand. I had 4 hands that night, if you count the ones that weren't mine. You'll say I'm being cute, but I'm not. The chimes came early. The first set found me on the stairs. 1, 2, 3, 4. I pressed my palm on the wall for the lie of comfort. The tile was sweating. The second set came when I hit the landing. 1, 2, 3, 4. The third came in the valve chamber where the sock was. 1, 2, 3, 4. I killed my light and counted to 30. At 15, something whispered behind my right ear, 6. The voice had that hospital sheet sound. I skipped a number like the sticky note said. 22. I said it too fast. The whisper restarted. 1. It wasn't angry. It was grateful. like I'd given it a reason to stay in the game. When I hit 30, I turned the light back on. Everything was ordinary about the way hell can be ordinary when it wears brick. The levels climbed on the console upstairs. You can read a flood like a plot if you've watched enough. It's not a straight line. It's a staircase in a drunk house. You'd think the obvious choice is always open the gates. That's not how it works. There's upstream and downstream, and the river doesn't care about your downtown bar with live music if upstream wants a visit all at once. You release too quickly and you drown the viaduct where the encampments collect. You hold too long and the old square feels like a bowl nobody likes to admit is below river level. The idea is to make everybody mad in small ways rather than sacrificing one neighborhood to keep the mayor's lawn dry. I did what the book said. I did what my uncle had taught me, which was mostly to not be a hero, because heroes are just people who didn't believe the water could stack in 3 places at once. I logged. I chewed gum so old it had gone soft like dough. I listened. At 2:13 a.m., the intercom in the control room crackled. No one uses the intercom. It's a box older than my parents and talks like it hates itself. It hissed and clicked and said, in the voice of the old receptionist who retired when I was in 9th grade, "Evan, honey, you dropped your peppermint." My name is Evan. I hadn't told the pipes my name. I stood up so fast my knee knocked the desk. The pen rolled and fell off, and the lick of it sounded like a snake in a paper bag. My throat got tight, not like crying, like someone had poured drywall dust through a funnel into my voice. "Don't go down for a voice," I told my mouth, out loud, like a prayer to my own lips. I felt stupid as hell, and I'm saying that so you know I didn't walk into this because I wanted to be chosen. I wanted to lock the door and sit there and wait for the storm to remember we're ants. The intercom sighed. He tied Bolins with his teeth, didn't he? Not my voice. Not my uncle's. Whoever it was knew something about my uncle that wasn't public. He did tie Bolins with his teeth. He'd bite the rope like it owed him money, and he'd make a knot sailors respected. I'd seen him do it a dozen times. He did it when he was thinking. He did it when he was sorry. That's the cruelest thing about the dead. You can harvest facts from what they did and wear them like a mask. My body went down the stairs anyway. I could tell you I fought it. I could tell you I cried. I did neither. I walked steady. The fence won't stay a fence if you leave the gate, stupid. That's what I told myself. That's not why I went. I went because I wanted something to ask for me. I went because I wanted somebody to say my name like it meant there was a rope at the other end of it. Left hand on the wall, right on the rail. The chimes came, but that's not news anymore. The air gathered slick on my teeth. You wouldn't think air could be wet inside your mouth, but it can. I hit the valve chamber with the sock and the hoist, and the peppermint I hadn't taken in months sat in the runnel shining like a little planet. The first time I saw it, I thought it was a trick of the lamp. The second time I saw it, it was still there, wrapped, red stripe catching my light. You don't know how bright something can be until you've lived long enough in surfaces that refuse to be more than dull. 6. The voice breathed from somewhere that learned the word behind from us. I skipped a number in my head. I said 10 out loud because I'm a coward who wanted the rules to be a life jacket. I knew better than to pick the candy up. I'm not an idiot. I'm something worse. I stood too long. That's all it takes here. The air in the valve chamber cooled. Not a breeze. Not a leak. A deliberate drop in temperature, the way you can open a fridge and feel the weather of a different country. My lamp smudged along the chain hoist. The sock was gone. Evan, the old receptionist's voice, said through the intercom speaker that shouldn't have been alive down there. "Do you want to hold her hand this time?" All the good parts of me argued. The flood staircase rose on the screen upstairs. The protocol written by men who've never cried Gatorade tears told me to call the supervisor, then the city emergency line, and then to log the call in 3 places before touching a valve. I had choices. I did. The honesty of a confession is measured by how ugly a choice you admit you made. I stepped to the wheel. The valve wheels are red, wide like steering wheels, flaked with paint that could show you paint's whole history from the 60s if you had time to pick. The metal had that humid bite. My glove squeaked. I looked up. because voices and eyes travel together. A face looked down from the dark of the tube above the wheel. Not a face. The idea of a face. A white oval with the features recessed too far, like a mask whose insides turned their back. Hair hung where hair shouldn't, in clots that formed points like roots searching for a crack. The mouth moved around my name, but made no sentence. The white of it pressed the dark so smooth, I wanted to lay my cheek there like a child at the cool side of the pillow. "Don't touch it," I said to my own hand. My hand listened, which is the nicest thing it ever did for me. "Count honest," the voice breathed, but it didn't want me to count, not really. It wanted me to run out of numbers and fall into a hole where rules stop. I went back upstairs and helicoptered the chair into the console and watched the staircase of the river press its knee into the town. I called my supervisor. He told me to keep the downstream gate at 30% and bleed the northbound culvert at 10 and to not do anything dramatic. "City Hall's watching," he said. He meant the mayor's ass is on a bench and my hands are the cushion. Someone knocked on the control room door. The sound was a courtesy joke. Nobody knocks on this door. I looked in the camera monitor. The lens showed black. "It's me, baby," the receptionist's voice said, like she'd brought cookies. She'd been dead 3 years. "Go away," I said stupidly. The fourth chime hit the desk from inside the wood. I opened the downstream gate to 40. Not because the city asked, because somebody knocked where it should be. Because I've never been good at being the kind of man who lets the house make its own sounds without climbing the stairs to check on them. When you open a downstream gate too fast, you drag the river's knuckle along the viaduct where people sleep under tarps. They hear it coming as a new kind of rain. It's low. It has a belly. It speaks fluently in loss. Sometimes there's time to climb. Sometimes there's someone too old or too high or too new to know where the stair irons are. I knew this. I knew it from trainings with donuts and coffee and videos where the flood is always a dark ribbon and never a man's bedroll or a woman's box of letters. I did it anyway. I watched the level drop in the wrong place. My throat swallowed, and the peppermint in the drawer of the console made the drawer smell sweet as a baby's shampoo. I closed the gate again at 32 when the numbers yelled enough. I told myself I had bought the old square time. You can hand yourself any currency if you don't show it to a cashier. For a while, the storm softened. The radio became brave again. The host used the word unprecedented, like we hadn't rehearsed this dance every summer of my life, as if the river arrives at this part of the play and tears up the script. At 3:40 a.m., the lights flickered. In the half second they went out, the dark was not emptiness. It was full up. My eyes strained like they were trying to push. The lights returned, and all the monitors had frozen at numbers that didn't make sense. 12.12.12.12. The intercom said, "You were a good boy." Not comforting. Assessment. She wasn't saying it to be kind. She was saying it to align me with a role she needed me to inhabit. Good boys open doors when someone knocks. Good boys don't spit their candy. Good boys go downstairs when called. I went down the stairs. I know. It's a bad idea to shout at a story you're hearing, to tell the person in it to do something different. If I'd been listening to this from a safe couch, I'd be screaming too. But in the moment, my feet knew the shape of those steps the way grief knows the shape of your house at night. They carried me like I was a tool they were in charge of. Sometimes you're not even the gun. You're the powder. I hit the valve chamber. The sock was back, but new. Clean. White. It had a little lemon on it. Smiling. Not a brand I knew. Not a brand anyone should know. Being a thing in a place it shouldn't be is sometimes all the wrong you need to see. I didn't touch the wheel. I swear to you I didn't. The chimes came until the fourth was so soft it was like a thought your brain tried to have about a sound. You know how it is when someone stands just out of sight and the hairs on your arm lean toward them. My arm hairs leaned. The chain hoist creaked. The peppermint rolled in the runnel a few inches toward me. "Skip one," she said. "Make me start again." So I said 22 because I'm a petty man. The voice sighed and said 1, and we started over. I counted slow. I counted like maybe counting could keep whatever pressed its face against the inside of the air from more than pressing. At 19, something cold touched the back of my neck. Not water, not a draft. Hands. Two. One small, one a little larger. People will tell you you can't tell the age of a hand by touch in the dark. Those people never did this particular math. Children's hands are forward. They lean. They're always hurtling into the next thing. They touch you like an idea about the world just arrived. That's what touched me. Two ideas. Two insistences. Then both withdrew at once like a mother pulled them away. I finished counting to 30. I turned the lamp on. The face in the tube had turned toward the light, and what used to be eyes had width that made my heart knock. The mouth had a knot in it, an actual knot, a bowline if you must know. Knotted hair or rope or something that learned for both. It vanished when the light pecked its edges. It left behind the shape of wet. Back upstairs, I did my job like a man, trying to end one kind of story before another kind took over. I bled the culvert. I held the downstream gates steady. I rerouted to the retention basin. I talked to my supervisor until he said the phrase, "You're doing great," in the voice of someone who is sure you're doing anything, but the rain walked out of town on the back of itself. The level dropped. The city made a sound you only hear if you're listening. Something like a house settling after a move-in. Something like a heart after a panic attack. At 5:01 a.m., I went into the men's room and pulled the sticky note off the door. My uncle's handwriting. Skip a number. Make her start again. I folded it small enough to put in my wallet. When paper's been living in damp in a station like this, it gives up being stiff and becomes skin. I slid it next to the debit card. I only used it ATM's too bright for how early it is. I told myself I'd done a good job. I told myself I'd save the square. I told myself anything that would plug the hole that had opened in the center of the night and had my name written around its mouth. In the news that morning, they showed a camp under the viaduct half washed to hell. A blue tent had wrapped itself around a support like a baby clinging to a neck. The anchor said, "Fortunately, no fatalities." The camera held on a woman picking through the where everything used to be, her hands moving in that stunned, slow way disasters breed, like water is thicker than air for a while. She pulled up a sock, white with a lemon. She held it like a question. The screen cut away. I swallowed. The peppermint in the drawer made the room smell like I'd knocked over a bowl of mints in a funeral parlor. The intercom said, as polite as a voicemail, "Call your uncle." Then it clicked off because even ghosts have the decency to finish the joke. You think that's the end of part one. It isn't. I wish it were. I wish I could give you a clean cliffhanger where I pretend I didn't run back down the stairs or call someone I shouldn't. But I said I'd tell it honest. Even if that means telling you I broke the only rule in our house that mattered. A week later, after a run of dry weather that made the city crack like a heel, I found a binder in the console I'd never opened. It wasn't the procedure binder. It was fatter, softer from use. On the spine, in a label plastic that had turned brown, someone had written incidents. Inside were forms that wanted checkboxes and dates. Those were mostly blank. What wasn't blank were the margins. Notes in different hands. One from 1979, clipped to a page with a rusted paperclip shaped like a question mark. It said, "Don't speak to the boy in the water. He'll ask about jokes. He doesn't remember any punchlines. Tell him you're busy." Another from 93. "They brought a cat to the grate. Don't open for a cat. I'm serious." At the back, tucked like a spine, a photograph, not an official one. My uncle, younger, hair long enough the station would have razzied him, holding a rope. He'd tied a bowline with his teeth. Next to him, not touching him, a woman with a badge lanyard. She held a child's jacket pinched with 2 fingers like it was clean laundry. On the wall behind them, the rules were newer. Rule 4 was the same. Peppermint. Serious arrow drawn next to it. Seriously. I put the binder back, and I didn't, because the act of replacing something that wants your eyes is its own gesture. In dreams since then, I've gone back to that binder and found it blank. In other dreams, it's full of recipes. This is both more and less frightening than it sounds. 2 nights later, the 4 chimes came, and I did what I had not done the whole time. I answered. "Who's there?" It was out of my mouth before the windows of the station had finished rattling with the sound. "Next," the intercom said, not a question. A cue. My uncle's gum rhythm lived in my teeth. My hand moved for the headlamp I'd set on the console. I went down into the pipe, and the dark smelled like peppermint and iron, and something like a hair salon where the stylist keeps all the hair in jars. I wish I could say I was tricked. I wish I could say I thought there was a kid alive and I answered to be a hero. The truth is uglier and also simpler. A thing had been pressing its mouth against the shape of my name, and I ran toward it like a moth toward a owl. I wanted to be called. If you've never wanted that, congratulations. Don't go below ground. I went below. I went because I wanted my name to have gravity. I went because the station had been saying please in 100 near words, and I was sick of pretending I couldn't hear. On the stairs, the air slid over my teeth like someone else's breath. The lamp jittered, not because it was failing, but because my hand had become more rumor than bone. The rules lived in my palms anyway, left on the wall, right on the rail. I gripped like it was a hand I knew. 1, 2, 3, 4. The chimes floated up the throat of the place and settled into the meat between my ribs. You tell me echo is harmless. Echo is a copy, but copies keep secrets the original had the decency to forget. "Who's there?" I said. I'd already said it upstairs, but that hadn't counted. Down here, the question had weight. You can feel when a word drops through air and lands in water. It makes a different shape in your mouth. "Who's there?" I repeated, slower, a challenge I couldn't afford. The lamp raked across the chalked wall and found new writing angling between older names. My last name, not my first. Letters fat at the start, starved where the chalk had worn. I touched the B with the back of a knuckle like you do when you don't want to smudge a thing that wants to smudge you. "Me," the voice said with a patient giggle that kids use when they're trying out being a person. "You forgot my knock knock. You promised a punchline." "I don't." "You promised," the voice said, and there it was, the flake of anger that makes a child sound older than their bones. The big pipe pressed a damp hush up against my cheeks. I didn't see anyone. That was the worst part. I wanted a body to inventory. Instead, the light kept carving the same beach out of concrete. The seam line, the fossil of gum, the crease where runoff wintered, and all of it looked normal enough to make me doubt I had a right to be scared. "You know jokes," a second voice said. Higher, closer to my knee than my ear, and that hurt in some spongy part of me, because kids' voices are supposed to be up here, not down where your shin hair knows when someone's looking. "You were the funny one." I swallowed. The peppermint in the runnel shone like a fish eye. I didn't touch it. "There's a flood on," I said, which was true the way a fever is true, even if it's small. "I can't." He tied knots with his mouth, a third voice saying, and my stomach did the thing where it drops, but also tries to leave. He tied faster when he told the jokes. "Like this, watch. There are a lot of ways hair can move without wind." I didn't know that until then. It can braid itself the way a creek braids gravel bars. It can make a bowline out of itself. It can pull through itself like string learning to be string. That's what I saw come out of the dark above the wheel. Something like hair forming a loop around nothing. The end fed through a bite made with no mouth, and yet the motion so inarguably a bite my own teeth ached. "Stop," I said uselessly. "Who's there?" the first voice asked, because rules don't belong to the living down here. They're borrowed by the dead. "You start," I said, and instantly hated myself for giving a game. "Knock, knock," the voice said, delighted and practiced. My throat did a thing where it was both open and not. "Who's there?" "Let," the voice said. "Let who?" "Let me in," 3 voices said together, and my lamp went from lamp to coin to useless. Not broken, just dimmed by someone else's idea of how bright I was allowed to be. I stood with my left hand scraping the wall grit and my right squeezing a rail that people had sweated down since '68, and I made a choice. I would count honest. Not to protect me, to buy seconds. That's all counting is. 1. My tongue tasted like a battery. 2. The air cooled, like the fridge had been left open again and the kitchen was playing midwinter. 3. Something small leaned its shoulder against my shin, and the pressure was just enough for my balance to adjust. That small attentive lean that nurses and toddlers have. The almost wait that says I'm here if you want to fall. 4. The chimes try to climb inside my mouth from the outside. 5. I thought of my uncle's gum. The stubborn mint that never went away no matter what you ate after. The transistor radio that picked up only one station when the storm came. How he'd look at the plant in his Cocoa Puffs like a man seeing a whole swamp in a cereal bowl. 6. A sticky note flapped somewhere in the draft like a mouth laughing through paper. 7. Skip 1. She breathed, patient behind me. Make me start. 8. 10. I said, petty again, and the counting reset with a small rain of grit as something in the wall shifted. Not a collapse, just an old building remembering it had more shapes. 1. The voice wasn't mad. It was grateful to be given a ritual. Rituals feel like fairness, even when they're anything, but at 13, cold skin slid over my fingers where they held the rail. I squeezed until metal bit my glove. Tiny fingers threaded between mine and did not squeeze back. I didn't look at our hands. The texture was so plain and so wrong. Like a child hand that slept in a river long enough to forget prints. It made a loop around my index finger and then let go with that hair/water slip I can't describe without sounding like a liar. When I hit 30, the light let me have slope again. The peppermint lay in the runnel where only a fool would put it. My lamp cut a little smile into the foil. I left it. I left it like a man leaving a ring on a nightstand neither of them will admit is hers. The voices didn't follow me up the stairs, not in sound. You need to know they didn't. I want you to know it wasn't cartoonish, that I wasn't chased. That's worse in a way. They let me go. They let me act like I own my steps again. Up in the control room, the monitors had numbers again, and the radio had returned to light jokes about sandbags, as if anyone in this city laughed at sandbags. I should have called the supervisor with something other than the good boy report I gave. I should have said there were voices and a knot that was hair, and my name chalked where rain eats chalk, and I was losing the argument with the intercom. Instead, I lied with the truth. Downstream at 32. Culvert at 10. That's how most lies are shaped in my life. Numbers that suggest harmlessness covering a hole. When my shift ended, I didn't go home. I went to my uncle's storage unit, the one with the metal door that rolls up like a tongue. I had the key because estate is a word that turned a drunk man's fishing rods into a responsibility. The hallway smelled like wet cardboard and that vanilla they pump into places made mostly of money you owe. Inside, everything had edges worn round by years of being moved. Milk crates with old manuals, a box of bungee cords, a cooler with a bottle opener screwed to the side, a 5-gallon bucket full of rags that looked like old t-shirts with the faces rubbed off. I went for the lockbox under the folding table. You know the kind, dented, taupe, ugly as a tax. The key turned easy. Under the petty cash ledger, 5 ones, 3 quarters, a key to nothing anyone remembers, was a stack of Polaroids rubber banded with a cruel kind of care. If you've ever looked at a Polaroid in a storage unit with the door clattering down on a Sunday morning, you know those photos have a climate of their own. It's always a little colder in the little white rectangle. These had the dead color that skin takes on in a flash. Kids, not hundreds, not a collection. 9, sitting on the lip of a pipe that looked so much like the siphon I didn't need to squint. It was the siphon. Some were grinning like you grin when an authority tells you to. Some were trying to look tough. One had socks with lemons. On the back of one photo, Sarah H. wants to learn a knot. On another, telling the joke. I hated every corner of my body at once. I hated my uncle for dying where nobody could claw him back to the station for answers. I hated the chain hoist like a word your mouth knows you shouldn't use. I hated, selfishly, the way each photo had edges fingernail soft from touching. Who touched them? How many times? Why did my own hand not want to put them back? I took the box. I wanted to burn it, and I wanted to put it in the river, and I wanted to take it to the police and throw it through the glass. I did none of those things right away, because doing anything right away meant admitting something full-size was alive in the dark of my job, and that would make me either a liar at work or a witness in public. Men like me choose the hell with fewer forms. That night, I went to shift with the box on the passenger seat like a dog. I put it under the console where I put my lunch. I tried to do my job. The city tried to be a city. People yelled at each other in bars about the same 3 topics. The river shouldered past with its old suitcase of grudges. At 1:02 a.m., the intercom clicked. "Baby," the receptionist's voice said, like I was holding while she found the file. "You found souvenirs." "Stop," I hissed through my teeth. "Don't you want to bring them back?" she asked. "The river keeps what's put into it, but it's polite. It'll let you see, if you open the right door." "The right door kills somebody," I said. I could hear the anger in my throat, and it sounded like my father the day the lawnmower quit. "No," she said mildly. "The right door opens the wrong door later. But later isn't a problem if you can't imagine it. Can you imagine it, Evan? Can you imagine beyond your name being said nice?" I left the box under the console, and I went down, and I didn't go down, and I went down. Reality breaks into frames when you disagree with yourself. One frame, I was sitting in the chair listening to an old woman's voice come out of the metal box. The next frame, I was halfway down the stairs, counting not to 30, but to 3 because that's how long my lungs knew it would hurt this time. Then I was in the valve chamber, and the sock was not in the chain this time. It was in the water, not soaked, sitting on the surface like a lily pad. I blinked, and it didn't sink. "Knock, knock," she said, soft as your mother when she wants to play and also wants to stop. "Who's there?" I said. My left palm was a raw grit smear against the wall. My right hand shook hard enough my glove squeaked against the rail at a rhythm that sounded like Morse code for help. "Us," a chorus said. The word had depth. You know how wind gets into a pipe organ and you feel it in your sternum? That. "Us who?" I asked, because pretending a script is a lifeline makes your lizard brain calm. "Us you washed," the voices said. And I think I did a thing you could call crying, but it was a dry sound like my eyes had closed around a handful of sand. "Tell another joke. Tell the one about the chair. Tell the one with the door." "You said." I started, but my tongue tripped over the lie. Not because I had told a joke, because I had said who's there to someone who wasn't. A door had been chosen, and the knockers get to step in. "Ask us to start over," she said. "You like that part?" I wanted to touch my wrist where the small hand had taken its measure before, but my body had unionized against self-soothing. I counted. I skipped a number not to be clever this time, but because the sticky note in my wallet was warm against my leg like it had been baking there and wanted out. The numbers reset. My breath found the bottom of my chest again, where the floor lives. "4," I whispered. "Cheater," one of the voices whispered back. And it was a child being cruel for the first time in the way that makes adults remember the world is not organized for us. "At 29, she started. Not the voice, the knocking. Not on a door. Under the slab. Not frantic, polite. A courtesy knock. Gentle as a question written on the back of a photograph. Out in the city, the viaducts slept. The old square slept less. I knew it would drown if I spun the downstream gate open. I could see their tents. I could see the doorway of the bakery where the bakers would shuck croissants out at dawn and swear the storm missed them by inches. I could see the old houses leaning their bellies toward the river as they always had, wanting a bath and pretending surprise when it came. I didn't open the gate. I stood and let the knocking go long enough for the polite to turn into please. "Don't make me ask again," the intercom said from no identifiable direction. "No," I said, and I meant it in my bones for the first time since I'd gone down the first night with a meter and a boy's idea of invincibility riding my headlamp strap. Silence isn't empty. It just stops being polite. The air thrummed. The concrete gathered itself. Something in the chain hoist clicked once like a camera. The peppermint in the runnel burst its own wrapper with a wet pop, and the smell hit me like a cough drop shoved into a bruise. "Okay," the voice said. Not angry. deciding. Then we'll go up. It's hard to explain what I heard when I hit the stairs. Not one set of feet. Not a stampede. You know how wind can argue across a field of tall weeds, and every stalk participates? Like that. Like every hair on every surface decided to go in one direction. Up. They didn't make the lights flicker, and that might be what finally broke me. I could have blamed flicker. I could have said old wiring. Instead, everything worked great, while something that had gotten used to being washed moved with intent. Upstairs, the radio dropped its weather voice and went to song. A chorus that had ranked my childhood. A chorus I'd made out in the back seat to. A chorus that had the word river in the chorus and used it like a lover you could trust. It made me want to smash the speaker. I didn't. I stood in the door of the control room and watched in the monitor a thing I'd never seen. The camera in the alley behind the station, grainy, ordinary, handrail dumpster moths. And then hair. Not attached to a head in the way you think. Hair rising up from the drain like weeds discovering sky. Hair dragging itself across concrete like a net. On the end of those lengths, shapes. Not bodies. Give me credit. I won't lie to you. Not anything so tidy. Just pale ovals dragging. Smears. Socks. I threw the console drawer open and grabbed the Polaroids and almost ripped them. That's how hard I grabbed. I didn't want them. I didn't want them not to be mine. I wanted leverage. I wanted a currency. The intercom hissed. Bring them, she said. Souvenirs belong where they were bought. My uncle had taken pictures. Maybe he'd done worse. I won't claim he smiled. He probably chewed gum the whole time because that's what he did. When my head is cruel, it puts a peppermint in his mouth too and makes his jaw click. I'm sorry, I told the box. I meant the kids or the city or myself. Pick a noun. The sentence is true. I went out into the alley like a fool. If anyone had been walking a dog at 3 in the morning back there, they would have seen a man with a headlamp and a box holding photographs to his chest like a bad groom. The drain hissed. The hair moved like vines with hope. The smell found me first, river rot and sugar, the rot you get when sweet things die. I knelt. I held the Polaroids at arm's length. Take them, I said. I expected a grab. I expected drama. I got something worse. Hesitation. The hair pulled and then arranged itself around my wrist, not touching. It made a shape like a hand poised just above another hand. It wanted me to invite it. Consent is the cruelest thing a place like this can ask. Fine, I said, and put the Polaroids in the water. The paper drank like a man after a work shift. The faces warped. The corners peeled. A lemon sock swam into the frame as if called. Joke, a voice said from the drain. The word wore my name like a dress. I don't. I started, then stopped because what I wanted to say was I'm not the one you want. But I was the one standing there. That's all you have to be. Knock, knock, I said, tasting bile and peppermint at once. Who's there? She whispered, and outside in the street a truck rolled through a puddle and made the long sibilance of rain that is nowhere else to go. Later, I said. Later who? Later I go back upstairs, I said, and that was the worst punchline in the world, but it was mine. I got to keep it because the hair slipped away without touching me, and the drain made a small approving burp, and then it was silent in that way. That means not silent at all, just waiting. For 3 nights after that, the station behaved. I did my quarter hours like a priest. I logged like a liar who wants to be believed. I kept the sticky note in my wallet. I chewed gum so hard it gave up and became paste against my molars. I looked at the chain hoist and pretended it only knew how to lift heavy things. I did not take the peppermint from the drawer. I slept at home in sideways naps, waking when the pipes in my apartment clicked and naming them out loud, so my mouth would be full of ordinary words. On the 4th day, the city called a press conference on the steps of the old courthouse. Tents had been moved from the viaduct to the parking lot behind the bus station. Volunteers handed out socks without lemons. The mayor smoothed his tie even when he didn't need to. Someone asked about the siphon. Someone always asks. He said words like resilience and preparedness and investment. He did not say haunted. He did not say souvenirs. He did not say we wash children through there because the fence doesn't only catch leaves. After, I went to the station and I didn't turn on the lights. The dark in a room you choose is different. It is a friend who minds your silence. I sat and put the incident binder on my lap. I read the margins. I read the old notes. I read the one from 81 in a hand delicate as a teacher's. Do not put names on the wall. They do not stay. They become something else. I took a pen and added my own. Don't answer. If you answer, lie. I meant I'd lie to the voices. I meant I'd break the ritual. It looks like a brave note if you don't think about it too hard. It was a note that let me pretend I was in control by promising to use their own game on them. That never works. If you play at all, you lose at their speed. That night the flood stayed away because storms need naps too. The intercom stayed mute. The peppermint stayed in the drawer. I went downstairs on the hour and touched the wall like it was a thing that could be comforted by pressure. The skip-a-number rule started to feel like a prayer bead, thumbed and greasy with belief. In the far chamber, past where the chain hoist gives up being useful and starts being a shape you're sure has hands, I found the sock again. Not in the chain, not in the runnel, hung on a protruding piece of rebar like a flag at a parade nobody came to. I took it down. I put it in my pocket. It was cold only on the inside. I hate that I know that. Back upstairs, I put the sock on the console and covered it with a pad of forms like that made as secret. I told myself I was going to take it to the police on my way home. You can judge my follow-through. I will not defend it. The receptionist's voice came at 2:15 a.m. Did he ever tell you why he put the knots on the kids? She asked like a neighbor over a fence. He didn't. My tongue failed the sentence. He said it was so they wouldn't float up and scare anybody, she said, with the easy meanness of someone repeating an excuse they liked. But really it was because he liked to do something hard with his mouth while he pretended to listen to them. Everybody tells jokes when they're nervous. It's sweet. The room tilted a notch and then settled. I was glad to be sitting because my knees chose that moment to be decorative. It wasn't him, I said, because my body wanted to be a good nephew the way some people want to be good parents. It was other men too. There were other names in the binder. It's not, don't hang it all. You want it to be bigger so you can be smaller in it, she said, not unkindly. Okay, it's bigger. You're still a door. Don't call me that, I said. What should I call you? She asked, and she said my name again, and I wanted to throw the radio through the glass. I went down one more time that night. It's possible I went down 100 times in those hours, and I'm compressing it to save us both. Memory is a shy accountant. In the valve chamber, someone had written a joke on the wall in new chalk, which meant a human hand had been here within a day. Knock, knock. Who's there? Sarah. Sarah who? Sarah, you gonna open the gate? The humor of the dead is a hammer with a very small head. It beats and beats until you miss the point, so hard you laugh. I put my thumb on the letters and the chalk bit into my whirl, and I loved that tiny pain because it was not a voice. It was physics. It was rock and stick in hands. I dropped my hand to my side and felt the sock in my pocket and wanted to fill my pockets with rocks like that story and walk into the river and never have to count again. I didn't. I went back upstairs. I held the sock to my face and smelled lemons far away under river and iron and peppermint. I turned the sock over. On the cuff, an indent where a safety pin had paired it once. My throat made a dry sound. At 3:37 a.m., the monitor on camera 3, upstream grate, whited out with the snow of old CCTV. A shape walked through it. If you pause your life in moments like these, you can pretend you have agency. I didn't pause. I stared. The shape resolved like paper under a heat gun. A boy, 8, 10, hair plastered down like the part never moved. Shirt too tight across one shoulder the way things get when they're wet then dry then wet. He put his face close to the camera and the lens fogged and then cleared like he was breathing slow, polite. He wasn't looking for me. He was looking at the idea of a person. Kids do that. He mouthed a word, even through 70 lines of resolution and a camera from another century. Mouths make clear shapes when they belong to children who say joke words. Knock. Then the screen went back to snow. Then it went to the grate and the ordinary water doing its ordinary patient work of carrying the town away grain by grain. I stabbed the call button to my supervisor and got nothing. The city phones were having their own weather. I turned the radio on the desk down because the song had switched to one with a bridge about forgiveness, and I was not accepting that guest. Down below, the chimes came again and again until 4 was a mercy. I didn't answer. I counted. I counted as a way to be a wall. At 12, I skipped to 14. At 19, I said 19 again. At 30, I said 31 because sometimes pettiness is honest prayer. Evan, she said. I hated how good she was at my name. We can take a break if you want. We can come back when you're ready to say another joke. Don't come back, I said, which was childish and sincere and did not work. They came back on a day shift. That matters. I had believed in the clock the way a dog believes in the leash. I thought I would be allowed to have a sun and a ham sandwich and a nothing hour where paperwork made my brain laugh. At 11:12 a.m., under a sky that looked like a pretty lie on a real estate brochure, the intercom clicked and a voice too bright for Storm said, "Tours today." I had the sock on my desk. Don't ask why. Don't ask why I didn't take it to a person whose job it is to be handed horror. I took it out and I ran the lemon between my finger and thumb until I could feel the emboss. "No tours," I said. "We're already here," she said. And kids giggled in the background exactly the way 100 kids giggle when they've been told to be quiet for 2 minutes and they last 40 seconds. "No," I said. "No more. No more jokes. No more knocks." The magic of refusing is that it works right up to the moment it doesn't. The cameras all went black. The lights stayed on. The radio cut to static with a human voice under it like a talk show bleeding through, words hopping channels. He said he didn't. Bolin, peppermint cuffs. My own breath learned a new shape. Wide and shallow, a man gasping around the rim of a bowl of cold soup. I went down without a lamp. My body knew the stairs by then, as well as my mouth knows my address in a doctor's office. Left hand on the wall, right on the rail. The dark was not empty and also not full. I know that's useless to you. I say it anyway. It felt like a throat between swallows. At the bottom, something bright as a coin lay in the runnel. The peppermint I had not taken, but a new one unwrapped. Who's feeding you? I thought, irrationally jealous. The hair in the water made loops. Knots. A short length formed a demonstration. Bolin. Sheet bend. Slip. It teaches because I want to learn. It teaches because I want there to be a test I can study for. There isn't. Tell us a different one, the boy's voice said, and I hated the way his or sound had the softness of baby teeth. I don't have any, I said. My throat grazed raw. I'm not the one who told you jokes. You are now, he said, and I saw it then, colder than anything. This place doesn't care who did it first. It cares who will say yes now. I sat down on the slab. My ass went cold immediately. I put my hands on my knees like I could ground myself in my own femurs. Knock, knock, I said, and I invented a joke so bad I hope to God no one ever says it again in any context. Knock, knock. Who's there? Gate, I said. Gate who? Gate closed, I said. No more. That's not a joke. That's a decision wearing a mask. But the kids laughed. It was terrible laughter, the way kids laugh when they see a parent pretend fall. Part shock, part relief tuned wrong by longer echoes. They laughed long, enough the sound turned to breath again. Then it stopped. I kept breathing into the shape of the count, even though I wasn't counting because my mouth needed employment. The sock in my pocket warmed against my thigh like a mouse trying to get out of the cold. Do you want this back? I asked the dark. Is this the thing I can give you that makes you leave me alone? You brought souvenirs, the receptionist said. And I wanted to scream at her because none of this was her except her mouth was now the station's mouth, and I couldn't hate a slab. Bring them where they go. The water below the wheel made a sound like a throat clearing politely. The hair moved in one direction, toward the upstream grate, against the faint trickle. I know water doesn't move like that. I know hair doesn't lean of its own accord toward daylight. I put my hand on the wheel and I didn't turn it. I put the sock on the slab. Take it, I said. You'd think hair would pull it. Hair doesn't pull. Hair makes ways for things. The sock slid toward the runnel like someone had put a finger behind it and dragged. The lemon winked. It went around the curve and out of my light and was simply gone. The intercom sighed like a lady who has been trying to tell you the same thing about the casserole for 20 years, and you've only just now repeated it back. See, she said, door. I'm not opening anything, I said, and she laughed once, not cruelly, sadly, as if she had been stupid once too and had compassion for my temporary condition. The station went calm. Day shifts have a blessed boredom you don't respect until you've seen the night-eat ritual like candy. I held that boredom on my tongue like a lozenge. I did my rounds. I logged. I let the clock be right. At 5:09 p.m., half an hour before the next guy, the city called. Not the supervisor. The city. A woman whose job title I don't envy asked if I'd seen anything at the upstream grate. We had a call, she said, voice tight. A dog walker reported something. We're sending a crew. We just want to know if you can see anything on your end. I klicked kamera 3. The grate took me in. The water did that sparkling trick it does when the sun is low and filthy parts of it pretend to be holy. Something pale looped the bars. Not fabric, not plastic. A braid. A child's braid. The elastic at the end had a little white bead clipped on it shaped like a flower. The braid moved along the bars like a snake. The little bead clicked once against metal and then again as it made the corner, and then it was gone into the pipe that leads to the culvert, that leads to the river, that leads to the ocean, which is a garbage can that pretends to be a god. I told the city woman I saw debris. The lie was true. It's all debris when you forgive yourself the comfort of nouns. The crew came. They drugged their rakes. They found nothing they wanted to tell me about. One guy leaned into the station and lifted his chin. Place still haunted? He asked like a joke built on more jokes. Yeah, I said. By me. He laughed because he's a man in a bright vest who needs his job to be physical and not metaphysical. I don't blame him. I watched him leave. I put the incident binder back. I put the peppermint from the drawer on top of it. I turned the intercom off. It doesn't matter. It still works when it wants. You want the part where I go to the police. Here it is. I did. I took the Polaroid with the lemon sock and the note with Sarah's name because that one made my hand shake in an instructive way. I sat in a little room. I told a detective with a haircut so literal it made my mouth tired that I found these in my uncle's unit, and I think they're connected to old missing kids cases, and I think some were washed through the siphon. And if you dredge the retention basin with more respect than the budget allows, you might find things you can name, and then you can put names on them. He asked why I didn't bring them sooner. He asked if I had more. He asked if I had touched them without gloves. He asked if I knew the city would have a field day with liability if the siphon got dragged into it. I said the city can suck my liability. He smiled once without his eyes. He said they'd look. He said he was sorry about my uncle. He said my uncle was probably not the only one. I said I knew. He said he'd call. They dredged, but not because of me. This city dredges when a budget line gets loud. They found pieces of more than debris. Not much. Time had its way, and then the water had its second way. A family got a call about a Levi's button that matched what their kid had been wearing in 1982. Another family got a call about a tiny wrist bone with a healed fracture that matched a medical record from the Reagan years. The news said closure like closure is a lid that snaps. I watched. I chewed gum. I threw up once into the mop bucket because I'm not the kind of man who can look directly at a mother and hold my sandwich inside my body. They never knocked on my door. I had brought them nothing they could charge. The station did not make the news. The river's name did. It always does. Rivers get to be the villain if you ask right. The intercom stayed quiet for a month, and I thought maybe I'd close something by giving them a joke with a no in it. Then, late on a Tuesday when the city smelled like hot brakes and the river wore a necklace of goose feathers, the chimes came to the desk again. 1, 2, 3, 4. Polite. Practice. No, I said, and then I said it louder because sometimes you tell the room first before you tell the thing in the room. No more jokes. You're not funny anymore, the boy said. His disappointment was genuine, and it stung in a place I wish I didn't have. "Correct," I said, and I turned my lamp on even though I was upstairs and the lights were already bright. I held the beam against the wall like I was painting the room with something stronger than Phillips. They knocked again. This time it wasn't 4. It was 2. Knock, knock. The sound came from the drawer with the peppermints. I opened it. The candies had been scattered like someone had counted how many I owned. On top of them, a sticky note I hadn't written in a slanted, careful hand. "You're late." It had a little grease streak everything in that place picks up if it lives there too long. "Fuck off," I said to the candy, which is the most insane sentence I've ever spoken, and it felt right, which means I'm ruined. They never took my name away. That's important. Some places do. Mine kept it and used it, and when I stopped answering, it kept it warm. They came back in dreams that smelled like wet pennies. They came back when the kitchen sink knocked because the upstairs neighbor hit their garbage disposal. They came back when the toddler in the apartment next door told knock-knock jokes into the thin wall and insisted on being the one to do both parts. "Knock, knock. Who's there? Banana." "Banana who?" "Banana." "Banana who?" "Banana." You know the bit. It's designed to exhaust you. It's designed so that when the kid finally says, "Orange," and you say, "Orange who?" and they say, "Orange, you glad I didn't say banana?" you laugh like you're free. It's training for living under rules you didn't draft. You want the ending. You wanted to pull a lever and have it be justice. I'll give you the true one. I stayed. I took other jobs a man takes when he doesn't trust his head. I came back to the night. The rules stayed taped to the board. The sticky note with my uncle's handwriting yellowed in that way paper does when it has absorbed enough breaths to be part of a lung. Every new guy who came, I showed the board. I said rule 2 louder than the others. I told them peppermint wasn't for panic. I told them not to spit it. I made them practice counting honest. I made them skip a number without feeling like they were cheating. They laughed. It's fine. Laughter is a tool. The receptionist's voice shows up sometimes like a scent. Cinnamon in a hallway in January. She says my name the way a checkered tablecloth says picnic. I don't answer. I count. I hold both rails when I need to. I let go of both when I want to feel like I don't belong to any ritual, and if that sounds like a suicide, it isn't. It's a man who understands he is a door and keeps it latched. I drive past the river on my days off. I watch fathers teach their kids to skip rocks like each flat stone is a secret told at speed. I see a woman with a lemon sock on her toddler, and I almost cross the grass to tell her to take her kid home and never learn jokes. I don't. The world keeps being the world. The water keeps wearing the city like a shirt. The fence holds until it doesn't. We learn to smile. We learn to count. We learn to skip numbers. Last week, a man from the city came by with a clipboard to talk about upgrades. Digital gates, he said, and my teeth hated that phrase. Remote, he said. You'll love it. Less at risk. Less of what? I asked. He looked at the rules on the board and smiled like a person at a little museum in a small town. Of going down there at night, he said, and the way his voice lifted, I knew he had already practiced that sentence at other stations, at other doors. Fewer bodies in the tunnels. He meant fewer employees. We heard different things. I nodded. He nodded. We both pretended we'd agreed. I went downstairs that night, and I put my hand on the wall, and I counted even though nothing knocked. I touched the place where my name had been chalked, and I felt the chalk inside the concrete like a scar under a tattoo. I put a new sticky note in the binder in my uncle's slot. My name isn't a door, I wrote, then scratched it out and wrote, if you knock, nobody's home. It's a lie I'm allowed. There aren't many of those. I go home in the mornings, and I make eggs, and I don't look at the sink when the pipes talk. Kids tell knock-knock jokes on phones now. The algorithm gives them 20 at a time. They giggle at their own punchlines. I turn the volume down. I let the city make its noises. I let the river and the pipes and the drains talk among themselves like a family I belong to but don't. I keep my peppermint in my pocket. Not to suck, to give back when asked. And yeah, sometimes I miss the nights that were just coffee and kino and the organ hum. I miss when the rules were jokes and the jokes were harmless. But I know better than to say I want the old quiet back, because the old quiet had kids in it, hair in the grates and socks on chains. And I'm glad nobody I love told me a knock-knock joke into the big pipe while tying a bowline with their teeth.